Ethan walked through the bustling corridors of the space station, his boots echoing against the metal floors. He had been traveling for hours, and his eyes were starting to feel heavy. The lights above flickered every few seconds, casting long shadows on the walls. The station was massive and it felt empty, even though he knew there were thousands of people here. He was just passing through, looking for a quiet place to rest, before continuing his journey to the next planet. He hadn't expected to meet her today. Lyra stood in front of him, tall and graceful, her dark almond-shaped eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and something darker. Her silver hair shimmered like strands of starlight, and her skin glowed faintly, almost like it had been touched by the stars themselves. No, she was unlike anyone he had ever seen before. Ethan had heard of the alien races in the galaxy, but seeing one in person was another matter entirely. Before he could say anything, Lyra spoke. Her voice smooth, but with an edge that made him pause. "You have no business here, human." Ethan blinked, taken aback by her bluntness. "Excuse me?" Her lips curled into a small, cold smile. "You shouldn't be in this part of the station. It's forbidden for your kind." Ethan frowned, feeling a slight discomfort at her words. "I didn't know there were any restrictions," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just passing through." Lyra didn't seem to care about his explanation. Instead, her eyes narrowed, and a strange power seemed to fill the air around them. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, as if the very atmosphere had shifted. He took a small step back, unsure of what was happening. "You should have stayed away," Lyra said, her voice colder now. "You've angered me, human, and for that you will pay." Before Ethan could react, the space around him began to warp. He felt a sharp, sudden pressure on his chest, like a weight pushing down on him. His breath caught in his throat and he staggered forward, feeling dizzy. Lyra's eyes were glowing now, a soft, eerie light that seemed to pierce through him. "Wait, what are you doing?" Ethan gasped, trying to steady himself. Lyra's eyes met his, her expression unreadable. "You have been cursed," she said softly. 7 days from now you will die. This is my gift to you for trespassing where you do not belong." Ethan's heart raced. The words didn't make sense. "What? You're saying I have only 7 days left?" His voice was shaky, filled with disbelief. Lyra nodded, her expression cold. 7 days. And in that time, you will feel the weight of your actions." Ethan tried to take a step back, but his legs felt weak. It was like the air around him was thickening, making it harder to breathe. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. He had heard of alien powers before, but this was different. This was real. "Can't be serious," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't happening." Lyra didn't respond immediately, just stood there watching him with a mixture of contempt and something else, something almost ... sad. "It is happening," she said finally. "You'll have 7 days. I don't think you can run from it." Ethan's head spun. 7 days? How could that be possible? Was this some kind of joke? He tried to speak again, but his words caught in his throat. The pressure on his chest had lifted, but it felt like something invisible was still holding him in place. "You'll be dead before you can do anything about it," Lyra said, turning her back on him. "You humans think you can wander through the galaxy without consequence. Well, now you'll learn otherwise." Ethan felt a sudden surge of anger. "Wait," he called out, but Lyra was already walking away, her steps silent and graceful, like she hadn't just cursed him to die. He was left standing in the middle of the station, his thoughts racing. What had just happened? Who was she? Why had she cursed him? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. He couldn't just let this happen. He couldn't just accept death in 7 days without doing something about it. His heart pounded as he quickly turned on his heel and walked in the opposite direction. He needed to find a way to break this curse. He couldn't just sit around and wait to die. But how? How could he possibly change her mind? How could he change the course of something that powerful? He didn't have all the answers. But he did know one thing. He wasn't going to die without a fight. As he walked through the station, a strange sense of resolve began to settle over him. He had 7 days, 7 days to change everything. Days to win her heart, and he was going to use every single one of them. The next day, Ethan woke up feeling the weight of Lyra's curse still hanging over him. 7 days? That was all he had.
Ow.
The thought of it sent a chill down his spine. But instead of sinking into fear, he felt something else rising inside him. Determination. He wasn't going to let this be the end. Ethan wandered the space station, looking for Lyra. He had to find her. He wasn't sure why, but he knew he needed to understand more about her. He couldn't just accept that his life was over. There had to be a way to fix this. There had to be a way to break the curse. He was willing to do whatever it took to try. After searching for hours, Ethan finally found her. She was standing in a quiet part of the station, her back to him. Staring out at the stars, the soft glow of the stars reflected on her skin, giving her an almost otherworldly presence. Taking a deep breath, Ethan approached her slowly. "Lyra?" he called softly. She didn't turn around. "I told you, human. There's nothing you can do," she said. Her voice low and almost distant. Ethan stopped a few feet away from her, trying to choose his words carefully. "I don't understand why you did it," he said. "Why curse me to die? I didn't mean any harm. I was just ... passing through." Lyra still didn't face him. "Your kind doesn't belong here," she replied coldly. "Humans have a way of ruining things. I've seen it before." Ethan frowned, confused. "So, because of something humans have done, in the past I'm going to die? Just like that?" "Yes," Lyra answered, her tone hard, but he could hear the hint of pain beneath it. "That's how it works." Ethan took another step forward, trying to close the distance between them. "But I don't want to die. I don't want my last days to be filled with fear and regret. Can't we talk about it? Maybe I can show you I'm not like the others." Lyra finally turned to face him. Her dark eyes looked at him for a long moment, and for a second, Ethan thought he saw something soften in them, something that wasn't anger or hate. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. Ethan was taken aback by the question. "I care because I don't want to die. I care because you're not like other aliens I've met. I don't know why, but I feel like there's more to you than just this curse." She raised an eyebrow. "You think you can understand me? You a human?" I nodded slowly. "I think I can. Maybe not right away, but I'm willing to try." Lyra looked away, her expression unreadable. "I didn't ask for this life," she said softly, almost to herself. "I didn't ask to be this powerful, to have this burden. But it's mine to carry, and now it's yours too." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He could hear the bitterness in her voice, the sorrow she was trying to hide. It made him wonder what had happened to her. Why was she so full of pain? Why was she willing to curse someone she barely knew? "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "I'm sorry for whatever happened to you. I don't think you should carry that alone. If you want to, we can figure this out together." Lyra looked back at him then, her eyes softening for just a moment. "I don't need your pity, human," she said, though there was less force behind her words now. "You can't change the past. I'm cursed to live with it, and so are you." Ethan didn't back down. "I'm not pitying you, Lyra. I just want to understand. I don't think you're a monster, even if you think you are. I think, you're just hurt." Her expression hardened again, but this time Ethan could see the tiniest crack in her armor. "You don't know me," she muttered, but it didn't sound as confident as before. Ethan smiled a little. "I want to. And I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm not like the others." Lyra didn't reply, but she didn't walk away either. She stood there for a long time, looking at Ethan, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke again, her voice low. "Ow. I never asked for help. Ow. I don't want your sympathy. But if you're truly determined, there is one thing you can do." Ethan leaned in, eager. "Anything. What is it?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "There's a mission, a dangerous one. I need someone who's not afraid to risk their life. Someone who can help me retrieve something I lost a long time ago." Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. "I'll do it." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then, with a soft sigh, she nodded. "All right, but if you fail, your days will be over sooner than you think." "I'm not afraid," Ethan said with a grin. "Let's do this." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "We'll see how long your courage lasts." So the two of them set off on a journey neither of them could have predicted. As they worked together, something began to shift between them. Ethan didn't know how to fix the curse or why Lyra had cursed him in the first place, but he was certain of one thing: this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. Ethan and Lyra's journey took them through the wildest corners of the galaxy. The mission Lyra had spoken of was not a simple task. It was dangerous, demanding, and, for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly out of his element. But he wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when he had just started to understand Lyra. And not when the curse still loomed over his head. They were headed to an ancient ruin on a forgotten planet, a place that had once been home to an advanced alien race. The ruins were rumored to hold an artifact, something powerful enough to change the fate of entire civilizations. Lyra needed it, but she had refused to say why. She said it was personal, and Ethan wasn't sure if he should push for more answers, or simply trust her. But trusting her meant risking his life, and that's exactly what he was doing. They arrived at the planet just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie red glow across the barren landscape. The air was thin and dry, and the ground cracked beneath their boots as they made their way toward the ruins. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Ethan looked over at Lyra. She seemed calm, but he could tell that something was weighing on her. Her eyes were distant, her expression unreadable. He wasn't sure if it was the ruins or the mission itself, but it was clear that she wasn't as indifferent as she tried to appear. "You okay?" Ethan asked. Walking alongside her, Lyra didn't answer at first. She simply continued to walk, her steps steady and sure. Then, after a long pause, she spoke without looking at him. "This place brings back memories," she said softly. "Memories I'd rather forget." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy for her. He had learned a lot about her in the days since they started working together, but there was still so much she kept hidden. Couldn't blame her, though. Some things were too painful to share. They reached the entrance to the ruins. A large stone archway covered in strange symbols. Lyra stepped forward, brushing her fingers lightly over the markings. "This is it," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "The artifact is inside." Ethan stood a few steps behind her, scanning their surroundings. He had a bad feeling about this place. The air felt wrong, heavy, charged. It was like they weren't alone, even though the ruins appeared empty. "Let's hurry," he said, unable to shake the unease in his gut. "The sooner we get in and out, the better." Lyra nodded, but her face was serious. She led the way inside, and Ethan followed closely behind, trying to ignore the feeling that something was watching them. The interior of the ruins was just as eerie as the outside. The walls were lined with faded murals, depicting strange alien creatures and scenes of battles that Ethan couldn't begin to understand. As they walked deeper into the heart of the ruin, the temperature seemed to drop. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around him, feeling the chill seep into his bones. Lyra, on the other hand, moved with purpose, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. After what felt like hours, they reached a large chamber at the center of the ruin. In the middle of the room stood a pedestal, and on top of it, an object covered by a cloth. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice reverent. She stepped forward and lifted the cloth, revealing a small, glowing stone. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, shaped like a crystal, but pulsing with an inner light that seemed to call out to him. Lyra reached for the stone, but before her fingers could touch it, the ground beneath them began to rumble. Ethan's eyes widened in alarm as cracks spread across the floor, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a deafening roar. "Get back!" Lyra shouted, shoving Ethan away just as the ground gave way beneath their feet. Ethan fell, his heart racing as the world around him turned into a blur. He braced himself for impact, but before he could hit the ground, he felt a sharp tug on his arm. Lyra had grabbed him, pulling him into a narrow passageway just in time. The rumbling stopped, and they both gasped for breath, their bodies pressed against the cold stone walls of the tunnel. Ethan's mind was spinning. He had no idea what had just happened, but it was clear that whatever they had disturbed, it wasn't happy. "You okay?" Lyra asked, her voice shaky for the first time since they'd met. Ethan nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "Yeah, just a little shaken." "What was that?" Lyra's expression darkened. "It's a guardian. The artifact we're after is protected by an ancient defense system. We need to get out of here, now." Ethan didn't argue. The last thing he wanted was to stay in a place that was clearly trying to kill them. They turned and sprinted down the narrow tunnel, the sound of shifting stone echoing behind them. Lyra led the way, her movements swift and confident, but Ethan could see the strain in her face. She was pushing herself harder than usual, and he wondered just how much of a toll this mission was taking on her. They finally emerged into the open air, gasping for breath. The ruins were still silent, but Ethan could feel the tension in the air. Something was wrong. Could feel it deep in his bones. "Are we safe?" he asked, looking around nervously. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the horizon. "For now," she said. "But we can't stay here for long. The Guardian will be back, and we need to finish this before it gets worse." Ethan nodded, but his mind wasn't focused on the mission anymore. As they moved away from the ruins, he couldn't help but think about Lyra, the way she had protected him, the way she had opened up, even just a little. There was more to her than the curse. More to her than the cold, distant woman he had first met. As they walked together, side by side, Ethan realized that he wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for something else, something he hadn't expected. He was fighting for her. The days were running out. Ethan could feel the weight of the curse pressing on him, growing heavier with each passing moment. He had 6 days left now. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand. But as the clock ticked down, something else was growing, something unexpected. The connection between him and Lyra. The mission to retrieve the artifact had brought them closer. They had faced dangers together, survived the collapse of the ruins, and escaped the mysterious Guardian that had tried to kill them. Through it all, Ethan had been there for Lyra. She had started to trust him just a little bit more each day, but there was still so much he didn't know about her, about the curse, about the past she was hiding. As they traveled back to the space station after their mission, Lyra remained quiet, her mind clearly occupied with the artifact. Ethan tried to talk to her, but she would only give short answers. Always turning the conversation back to the mission, they reached the station. By nightfall, and as they walked through the dark corridors, Ethan decided it was time to confront her. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady but serious. "There's something you're not telling me. I can feel it. Why did you curse me? What's really going on here?" She didn't answer at first. She kept walking, her eyes forward, her face unreadable. Ethan stopped and grabbed her arm gently. "Please, tell me. I can't keep doing this without knowing." Lyra's expression hardened, but she didn't pull away from him.
Ow.
She was quiet for a long moment, and for a second, Ethan thought she might walk away. But then she turned to face him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't place. "Not just about you, Ethan," she said quietly. "It's about what I've lost, about what I've had to carry." Ethan felt his heart race. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a deep breath. "My people were destroyed. My home, my family, everything I loved it was all taken from me. And I was the one left behind to survive, to carry the pain." Ethan could see the pain in her eyes, the walls she had built to protect herself. He felt a pang of sympathy for her, understanding now that the curse wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was a result of her suffering, her fear, and her need for control over something in her life. "I didn't ask for this life," Lyra continued, her voice breaking slightly, "but I became what I am. I had to. I had to survive. And when I met you, You reminded me of everything I lost. Everything I hated. Ethan didn't know what to say. He could see the conflict in her, the hurt she was trying to hide. He had never expected her to share this part of herself with him, but here she was, opening up in a way she never had before. I didn't want to curse you, she whispered. I didn't know how else to deal with it. I didn't know how to make the pain go away. Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft. Lyra, I understand more than you think. I can't pretend to know what you've been through, but I know pain. I know what it's like to lose everything. And I don't want you to be alone in this, Lyra's eyes flickered with something fear. Hope. Maybe both. She looked away, her hands trembling slightly. I don't deserve your kindness, she said, almost to herself. You're going to die because of me. Ethan reached out and gently took her hand. No, I'm not. Not if I can help it. I know you didn't mean to curse me, Lyra, and I know you're not a monster. You've been through too much, and that's why I want to help. You don't have to carry this burden alone. For the first time, Lyra didn't pull away from him. She looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and something else, a longing. For peace? For healing? I don't know if I can forgive myself, she said quietly. I don't know if I can ever let go of the anger, the hurt, but you're the first person who hasn't looked at me like I'm broken. Maybe that's why I cursed you. Maybe it was easier to push you away than face what I've done. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to be perfect, Lyra. I'm not perfect either, but I'm here, and I'll stay here no matter what. You're not alone. They stood there in the quiet hallway, the only sound the soft hum of the station. Lyra's expression softened, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Maybe she could change. Maybe they both could. You're serious about this, aren't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled. I'm not leaving, Lyra. Not now. Not ever. Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she nodded slowly. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to try. For us. For me. For you. Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders, a sense of relief he hadn't known he was carrying for the first time in days. He felt a spark of hope. He had only a few days left to live, but maybe that was enough. Maybe the time they had left could be used to heal, to understand each other, and to find a way to break the curse. I think we can do this, he said softly. Together. Lyra gave him a small, tentative smile. Together. As they stood therein, the quiet of the space station, the future, was uncertain. The curse was still there, looming over them, but for the first time, Ethan wasn't afraid. He had found something worth fighting for. And no matter what happened next, he knew he wouldn't be facing it alone. The days were slipping away faster than Ethan wanted to admit. 5 days left. The curse still hung over him like a storm cloud, but now it didn't feel as threatening. Something had changed between him and Lyra. They had spent the past few days together, getting to know each other in a way they never had before. She had let her walls down, and he had shared his own fears and regrets. The curse wasn't as important anymore, but the connection they shared was. Still, the reality was hard to ignore. Ethan couldn't just sit around, waiting for death. He had to do something. He wasn't going to die without a fight, and he wasn't going to let Lyra suffer because of a curse she had put on him out of pain and fear. They were sitting in the quiet of their small cabin on the station, the hum of the engines, a constant background noise. Lyra was sitting across from him, her eyes distant as she studied a map of the galaxy. The artifact they had retrieved was safe now, but the feeling of urgency had not left her. She had given him the chance to change, but she hadn't spoken much about how to break the curse. Ethan knew she was still struggling with her past, and that was okay. He didn't need her to have all the answers. He just needed her to stay by his side. Lyra, he said, breaking the silence. I can't keep waiting for death to come. We need to figure out how to break this curse. We need to do it together. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she sighed and set the map aside, leaning back in her chair. I know, she said softly. I've been thinking about it too. I've been trying to find a way. I don't know if I can undo it. I don't know if it's even possible. Ethan's heart sank a little, but he refused to let his hope falter. But we can try, right? There's got to be something we can do. If we don't, Lyra held up a hand, silencing him. I don't want you to think that I want you to die, she said quietly. I don't. But the curse was never meant to hurt you. It was meant to protect me from the pain of what I lost. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. You don't have to protect yourself from me anymore. I'm not going anywhere. I want to be with you, Lyra, even if it means facing the hardest parts of your past. We can face it together. She looked at him, her eyes softening, but she didn't speak. It was clear that what he had said had reached her, but she was still holding back. Ethan didn't know how much more he could say to convince her. All he could do now was show her day by day that he wasn't afraid to stay. Find a way, he said finally, his voice filled with resolve. We've made it this far. We can make it through the rest of this, together. Lyra was silent for a moment, but then she nodded slowly. You're right. We'll find a way. With that, they stood together and began to make their plans. The next few hours were filled with research, searching for anything that could help them lift the curse. They scoured every ancient text Lyra had access to, trying to find a clue, a hint of how the curse could be undone. It wasn't easy. They faced obstacles at every turn, from corrupted data to mysterious ancient languages that neither of them could fully understand. But they kept at it, refusing to give up. As the hours passed, the tension between them shifted. What had started as a dangerous mission filled with fear and distrust had slowly turned into something more, something that neither of them had expected. By the time the sun set, they'd had a plan. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't guaranteed to work, but it was something. The curse, Lyra explained, was tied to a powerful artifact, a crystal hidden deep within a sacred temple on a remote planet. If they could get to it before time ran out, they could reverse the curse. It wouldn't be easy. The temple was surrounded by dangers, and even reaching it would require facing their deepest fears. Ethan looked at Lyra, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Are you sure we can do this? Lyra met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. We have to. And just like that, the uncertainty was gone. They were no longer facing the curse as two people trying to survive. We're facing it together. United by their shared goal, the next morning, they set off for the planet. The journey was long, and the closer they got to their destination, the more Ethan could feel the weight of time pressing on him. He had only 3 days left. But with each passing minute, he felt more and more certain that they could do this. Lyra had given him hope, and now he had to give her the same. The planet they arrived at was desolate, its surface covered in jagged rocks and wind-swept deserts. The temple they were looking for lay deep within the planet's mountains, hidden from all but those who knew its secret path. They spent hours navigating the rough terrain, Lyra leading the way with an almost instinctual knowledge of the land. By the time they reached the entrance of the temple, it was late afternoon. The temple stood tall against the setting sun, a silhouette of ancient stone covered in vines and moss. There was no going back now. They had come this far, and now they had to face whatever awaited them inside. Ethan turned to Lyra. You ready? She nodded, her face set in a mask of determination. Ready? Together, they stepped into the shadows of the temple, unsure of what would come next, but knowing that whatever it was, they would face it together. The entrance to the temple was dark and cold. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, worn by time, but still clear enough to be recognized as a language long forgotten. Ethan's heart beat faster as he looked at the door in front of them. This was at the last chance to break the curse. Lyra stood beside him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes focused. She had led them this far, through dangerous landscapes and hidden dangers, but this was different. This was the heart of her past. This was the place where the curse had begun. You ready? Ethan asked quietly, his voice steady but filled with concern. He wasn't sure if he was asking her or himself. Lyra nodded, her lips tight with determination. We have no choice. We do this or we don't. Ethan smiled softly at her words. knew that wasn't the answer she wanted to give, but he also understood. They had already faced so much together. The fear of failure was nothing compared to the pain of losing each other. They stepped forward, and as they did, the doors of the temple slowly creaked open, revealing a long, winding hallway. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of old stone. The floor was uneven, and every step they took echoed in the silence. "Stay close," Lyra said, her voice low, but it held a note of command. "The temple is designed to test those who seek the artifact. We can't let our guard down." Ethan nodded, though his own heart raced. He wasn't afraid, not really, but there was a growing feeling inside him that something was about to change. Something was about to happen that would either end everything or give them both a new beginning. They walked through the dark hallway, their only light coming from the dim glow of the crystals embedded in the walls. As they reached the end of the corridor, a large chamber opened before them. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it rested the artifact. It was a small, glowing crystal, its light pulsing in the quiet darkness of the room. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on the artifact. But as she moved closer, the ground beneath them began to shake. The room seemed to tremble and the air thickened with an unseen force. Ethan instinctively reached for her hand, but before he could, a voice boomed from the walls. "Only one may pass," the voice said, cold and deep, echoing through the chamber. "Only one may touch the artifact. If you fail, the curse will be eternal." Ethan's heart pounded as the voice continued. "Choose wisely, for the artifact knows your true heart." Lyra stood still, her face hard with resolve. "I have no choice," she said. "The artifact must be mine. It's the only way to break the curse." Ethan didn't understand. He could see the pain in her eyes, but the words of the voice made him wonder. Was this about breaking the curse for her? Or was it something more? Was the artifact testing them both? "We'll do this together," Ethan said firmly, stepping beside her. "No matter what, we're in this together. We're not giving up." Lyra looked at him, her eyes softening. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, the ground shook again, harder this time. The temple seemed to come alive with energy, and the voice echoed again. "Only one may pass. Choose wisely." Ethan felt the weight of the words. He had to make a choice that would determine the fate of both of them. The artifact was within reach, but something felt wrong. If he touched it, would it break the curse, or would it push them both further apart? "Lyra," Ethan said, his voice steady, "you don't have to do this alone. You've carried the weight of your past for so long. Let me carry it with you." Her eyes widened in surprise, but before she could respond, the air around them seemed to crackle. Ethan didn't know what was happening, but he could feel something pulling at him, something deep inside his chest. He couldn't let her face this alone. He had to prove that he wasn't just someone she had cursed. He was someone who cared. Someone who wanted to be with her, no matter the cost. The shaking stopped, and a stillness fell over the room. Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the artifact. The light from the crystal grew brighter, casting shadows on the walls. And then, a soft voice filled the chamber. "You both have chosen wisely," it said, the words gentle but filled with power. "The curse shall be broken." Ethan looked at Lyra, and in that moment, he saw it. The weight that had been on her shoulders, the burden she had carried for so long, lifted. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and relief. As though she couldn't believe it was over, the crystal's light grew stronger, and suddenly, the room around them began to fade. The walls, the shadows, everything seemed to dissolve, leaving them in a brilliant light. When the light faded, they were standing in the same chamber, but it was different now. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive weight of the curse had vanished. Ethan looked at Lyra, and for the first time, he saw her truly smile. Not the cold, distant smile she had given him before, but a smile filled with warmth and freedom. "It's over," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan reached out and took her hand, his heart swelling with relief. "It's over," he repeated. For a moment, neither of them spoke. simply stood there, together, knowing that they had faced the darkness and come out on the other side stronger. Yonalira said softly, looking at him with a smile. I didn't think I could ever let go of the past. But I think you've shown me that maybe I don't have to. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. You don't. We're in this together. Always. And with that, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. The curse was broken, and the future was theirs to build. Together,